Hey everybody, and welcome to another video from Electronic Armory. In today's video, we're going to build a full stack application with mobile apps from scratch. Now, I'm not going to do this in one video. This will take several videos, but we're going to start off with defining your model. We're going to build the Armory, a place where people can go to learn different topics from iOS, Android, electrical engineering, software architecture and engineering, and running a company. I want people to be able to log in and track their progress as they go through these different courses. And this is going to be similar to the college course that I teach. It's going to be well thought out, and you should be able to learn at your own pace. We're also going to be able to present these courses on the web and on the mobile device. So how do we go about building a very large piece of software like this? Well, you start off with your use cases. What are you going to use the software for? So a use case would be something like, I want to be a mobile developer who specializes in Android, and I want to build my first app. Now I've underlined the specific keywords that I want to address. Here's another example. I want to be a business owner who specializes in games, and I want to build another VR app. Now let's take this piece by piece. For the first example, I want to be a mobile developer. The mobile developer is going to be your discipline. The mobile developer who wishes to specialize in Android, that's going to be the program that you're going to be a part of. And so if you were thinking about this from a college course perspective, you would take a course on developing Android. And the last piece, I want to build my first app, is showing me that you're a beginner. Now let's take that second example again. I want to be a business owner. All right, well, being a business owner is a discipline. A business owner who specializes in games is part of a program on game development and running a game development company. And the last piece of this, I want to build another VR app, is showing me that you already have some expertise in building a virtual reality application, and maybe you want to take your skills to the next level. So you really want to define who your audience is by coming up with these use cases. Try to reword these sentences, put them in different order. Maybe you want to reverse that first example and say, I want to build my first app and I want to be a mobile developer, but maybe you're not sure if you want to be an iOS or Android developer. And so this software is going to need to show somebody what the differences are between iOS and Android before they even dive into the program so that they can make the right choice. Likewise, take the second example and reverse that. I want to build a virtual reality application that's a game. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a business owner to do this. Maybe you just want to be a developer, or maybe you want to be a designer. And so think about these different use cases and who your audience is and how they're going to use your software. Come up with as many use cases as makes sense for you and see what kind of order you can put them in, and maybe that might reveal who your audience is. Identify what they want. So we've identified a discipline, a program, and a course for those. So we have to figure out how to actually accomplish these goals of walking somebody through a particular discipline, a program, and a course. And that's going to be through lessons. So we're going to have different lessons within these courses to accomplish our goal of whatever we want our users to become. And my users are going to be you. Now, of course, you can specialize your software to be whatever you want it to be, but for this, I'm making the software for you guys so you can participate in these courses a little bit better than you are just by watching YouTube videos kind of randomly. So let's get started. So in our software, our user needs to be able to log in, to choose a discipline or disciplines. We don't want to limit him to just one. Maybe you want to be a business owner. Maybe you want to be a developer. Maybe you want to be a mobile developer. Maybe you want to be a full stack developer. Whatever disciplines we define in our software, we want the user to be able to choose amongst one or many. Now later, we might want to restrict that to one, but we should build into the software the option to have multiple disciplines. Likewise, with courses, we want to give the user the option to select different courses. Maybe they're in different disciplines, and of course, they're going to be in different courses as well. We also need the software to show us what lessons have been completed so that they can work toward their goal. A user might come back 3 weeks later or 3 months later and not remember exactly what lessons they completed. Or maybe they want to go back and watch the lessons that they've already completed so they can get a refresher in the content. And then our user needs to know what their subscription type is. Are they on a free subscription? Are they on a trial? Are they on a paid? Or are they on a professional? Whatever description types we define, they need to know what type they are. And finally, we really need to keep it simple starting off. And this is something that we call an MVP, or minimal viable product. In our minimal viable product, or MVP, we have to make sure that our model is solid. We don't want to just throw up data and hope that it scales or hope that it's extendable. So we have to really make sure that it is extendable so that we can make changes to our data model as we add new features or discover that we want to change the software fundamentally. And we only want to put in here what we really need to make this a success. Now, I know that this kind of software can balloon in terms of features and everything like that, but we really need to keep it pared down, simple, but at the same time, keep it extensible so that we can grow it out later. Otherwise, we'll spend too much time building and not enough time earning. So you might be asking me, why are we starting off with building our model instead of wireframes? Don't designers and web designers and other software developers start off with wireframes? Well, not always. And let me argue for model first. So between choosing between models or wireframes, I like to choose models first because this prevents feature creep. You really want to just be concentrating on what your data is going to look like. So let's concentrate on implementation, not on UI. The model should not depend on the UI. So for example, because we have a course, because we have a program, and because we have a discipline, that doesn't necessarily translate into a page that is a course or a program or a discipline. We might have a UI that displays all three of those objects on the same page. But if you're thinking UI first, your data might actually be influenced by that, and we want to prevent that from happening. So what I want you to start off doing, and you can use my example if you want, or you can come up with whatever you're trying to build, but let's sketch out some ideas about how our data is going to look like. So starting off at the top, we have a discipline, and I want that discipline to have a name. I might want to have like an image or some kind of thumbnail. I also want to have a description and maybe when it was created or modified and maybe a price if I want to start charging for this. And then under that, I have an arrow that points to programs, and it's actually a double arrow, which means it's a too many relationship. So a discipline is going to have many programs in it. In other words, let's pretend we have a discipline called mobile developer, and as part of that discipline, we have programs in iOS and Android. So under programs, again, we might have a thumbnail or an image, maybe a video trailer, description. And then I got to thinking about, well, we might have some resources, maybe external resources like links to ebooks or something like that. And so then I broke that out into another object called resources. And these are going to be a little bit more generic, but it's going to have a title, a URL, either internal or external, a description of that resource, and maybe a thumbnail again, a type of resource, whether it's a URL, and it's going to have what's called a weight. And the weight is going to allow me to use SQL to order that. And so by adding a weight to the data, I can actually show the importance and how I want it to sort in a particular list that I have. And most of these are actually going to have weights. Another thing I have is the level. Are you a novice? Are you intermediate, an expert, a professional? I also listed out some discipline types. And I started out kind of low level. I started off with iOS, Android, electrical engineering. But I realized that a discipline is more high level, such as mobile or electrical engineering, or maybe back end, front end, business, that sort of thing. And so I'm just throwing ideas here, I'm just writing them down. But I think discipline is really going to be either a mobile developer or electrical engineer or a web developer in general. And then under that, we can have program courses in, let's say, CSS for the front end stuff. I don't want to define these terms too specifically now, but you should start thinking about these and how your hierarchy will give you a taxonomy so that your content is searchable and also retrievable from the database so that we can show it in different ways. Okay, and finally we have course and then lessons. Now courses have lessons within them, and I kind of imagine each lesson is going to be a short YouTube video that you can watch and consume. And so it's going to have a video URI, it's going to have some maybe markdown for the description, so I can put in like bolded text, italicized text, paragraphs, that sort of thing, maybe a promotional image, and again, order. And then for the video URI, I also want to make sure that it has a high quality, a low quality, and maybe I just follow a schema for that and I just give a base URI. And so we'll explore that later videos. But if you notice, the arrows going back and forth are actually many to many because I want to make sure that courses have many lessons within those, but I don't want to assume that a lesson is only going to apply to a single course. Maybe I want to take a lesson in the difference between iOS and Android and actually include those in the iOS course and in the Android course. So really start thinking about, again, use cases and how you want to use this data. Not the UI, not how you're going to implement drop-downs or some fancy UI elements, but think about how people are going to use your data. And that's where I want you to start. All right, so I've taken what I've started on paper and pencil, which is usually how I like to work. And so for all my applications, this is usually the way I start. And then I translate it into UML or some other digital planning software. Now, this is going to be done in JHipster, and JHipster has something called the JDL Studio for actually implementing your data models. And this is really great. And so I've already done this for you, but let's go through it one by one. So if I move my mouse a little bit, you can see that the code that I wrote in order to implement this UML diagram on the right is creating these entities, giving the entity a name, and then in these curly braces, giving each attribute of that entity. So for example, discipline name is a string and it's required. We also have a discipline description that is also a string, and maybe we'll want to put a price on this, and that's going to be a long integer. Now with prices, what I usually do is I don't include decimals, because when you're working with floating point or double precision values, they actually become very, very inaccurate when you're dealing with exact values. So instead, a really good strategy is, let's say I wanted to sell this course for $9.99. In the data, what I'd actually represent that as is 999. And if I'm working in US dollars, I move the decimal point 2 spots. And so I don't have to do any calculation. I don't have to store this as a floating point. If you've ever seen a value like 9.9900000001, well, you're witnessing a floating point in precision. When you're doing price comparisons, this becomes very, very inaccurate. And so I don't recommend you do it. So I try to stay away from floats and doubles as much as I can. The next entity we have is our program, and then we have a course, and we have a lesson. And as I mentioned in the before, we also have this thing called resource. So let's go down to resource, where these are. And we can see that our resource has a name, a description, a resource URL, a resource preview image, a resource type, and a weight. Now this resource type isn't a string or a long or an integer, is actually another type called resource type, which is just a, if I can click on this, which is just a enumeration type. And the resource type is an image, a video, a tutorial page, a partial if we're dealing with maybe little tiny pieces of code, or a tool. And of course we can add on to this enumerated type later. Now let me scroll down here. We also have levels with the different levels that I've outlined on my piece of paper, and languages, so just some basic languages that I might want to support. And then finally, how do I connect all of these resources together? Well, you can see that they have these arrows here. And so the arrows for discipline goes from discipline to program. Now this is called a relationship. A discipline is going to have many programs in it. And so that relationship is called programs. And you can see that it is a star to star relationship, which means many to many. And the inverse relationship to that is called disciplines. So programs can also be part of disciplines themselves. So for example, I might have a discipline in electrical engineering and mobile development, but I might have a program that talks about Raspberry Pi, which may have to do with both mobile development and electrical engineering. Okay, so we define our entities and we define our relationships, and then we get this nice little UML diagram, and we can kind of look at the different relationships and the different layout of this to make sure that this is indeed what we want. When you go ahead and have JHipster create your code for all these entities, what it'll do is it'll create a class, a Java class called disciplines, and it'll have a reference in there called programs, which will be an array, and that array will be of type program. And then likewise, in the program class, we're going to have a member in there called disciplines, and it's also going to be an array of type discipline, and that's going to, of course, hold references to a bunch of different disciplines. And likewise, again, for program and courses to lessons. This is going to be what's in our database, and what are going to be created as POJOs or plain old Java objects in code. Go ahead and look at this now. When we go ahead and install JHipster and add these entities, you'll see exactly how this lays out. So just keep this in mind and let's watch the next video for more. Okay, so once I put this all into JDL Studio, how do we get this into JHipster? Well, we have to install JHipster first, and we'll definitely do that in the next video. But in the meantime, just go ahead and download the code for this by clicking on this. And then if you want a snapshot for documentation purposes, you can download the image there. You can also get a language reference to show you how you define entities, that sort of thing. So all of this is right here. If you're familiar with UML, highly recommend that you learn it if you're not, because it's really powerful. And if you ever get a job in the industry, they will kind of expect you to understand UML, or at least the good software engineering firms expect you to understand UML. Finally, you can share out this link to anybody that you're working on this with, and they can edit it. So let's remind ourselves what we're actually building again. We're going to build a learning management solution, or LMS, for anyone to learn about various topics in electronics. We're going to provide a way for users to track their progress, and this is going to be a full stack application with front-end, back-end, mobile apps in Android and iOS, and everything in between. We're going to talk about the API, how to communicate between mobile apps and backend, between front end and back end. So this is going to be a lot of different videos in order to accomplish this whole full stack solution, but I'm more than happy to invest the time if you're willing to follow. So make sure you subscribe to this video, because in the next video, we're going to actually get down to coding. We're going to install JHipster for backend or front end and everything in between, just like I had in my previous video. So if you're not familiar with our software stack, you can watch the previous video in Architecting Your Software Solution. Like and subscribe to see more. We'll see you at theelectronicarmory.com. Thanks.